While this is here is a place of solutions and optimism, the situation we're working on is rather critical. We'll get to minerals in a second, so there'll be a pun there. But right now, really trying to focus on the fact that time is kind of running out. Tipping points are already in motion, and we're still dancing. A lot of the things we talked about too today on the corporate panel, really interesting insights. The ROI of sustainability, the ROI of doing well, and let's really look at business models around it. But I want to go really high for a second at a meta level and talk a little bit about the policy environment. Framed as something here for those in the US, a couple of things. One, in 19 US states, you can't even legislate plastic. Let's say every citizen in Texas or Louisiana said, we don't want plastic bags. Guess what? You can't legislate it. Banned. Think about that for a sec. Number two, there has not been any legislation promoting reduce, reuse, repurpose in the United States until recently. But think about that for a second. Think about a bit for a second that you have $7 trillion going to one industry every year, oil and gas, by all the governments in the world. Think about that. Number two, take that power, and then note that they're also the most profitable. Saudi Aramco, wow, $215 billion last year alone on net profit. What I want to say for a bit is, we're sitting here in this room, and it's great to come together and talk about how we can build bottom up. But the system that I want to question this today for a second is it designed for reduce, reuse, repurpose, and as Deirdre mentioned earlier, net positive, not just sustainability, not just do no harm. We're already doing harm. So what we want to talk about today is look at examples now from the meta and a couple of landscape environments, by the way, in the US. If you not have heard of the Americas Act, look it up. The Americas Act, $18 billion to provide subsidies, incentives for textile reuse in the United States, and also working bipartisanly across the waters with Senators Bennett and Senator Landry in Louisiana. That's good stuff. Double down on that. Like, let's incentivize that. The other thing I want to do is take it for a second now and focus on some of the people that are doing such amazing work that we don't sometimes have the opportunity to pay attention to. So this man to my left, Chris Pallister, is working at the intersection of marine debris, plastic waste, policy, networking, in one of the most hardest, rugged environments in the world, Alaska. And when you frame the work that we're going to do it, I want to now play a little game outside with you before I hand it over to Chris. Here's a question. How many people, if you had an extra laptop, phone, let's say anything electronic, if you were given $50 to go return it to one spot, just to go return it, would you do it? Show of hands. Right. Now imagine at that one spot, you have one central location where that spot is in a black and brown community where reduce, reuse, repurpose is their business model to live. This is not an opt-in in a Patagonia repair shop. It is actually a way to actually frame a way of life of living for survival. You center a hub in one of these communities, right? And then you leverage the skill sets of those reduce, reuse, repurpose behaviors, and then you allow for a business model to come together where waste comes in, electronic waste, and either you can refurbish it and sell it, or you can take those critical minerals and give them back to the company. That's called urban mining. Not deep sea mining, not mining in the Congo. That is urban mining, just really creating context of using the material that we already have in each and every one's homes and providing incentives for it. That would work. Everyone here raised their hand. So the question is, why aren't we doing that, right? How is the system incentivizing net positive transitions? How do we enable that? Now in Alaska, what's interesting is we're going to talk a little bit not about critical minerals, but plastic. And I want to turn to Chris for a second because, so Chris and I have a common. Many of you have common stories. Chris and I are both families from Montana. We actually are families we found out when we knew each other. We are, 45 miles apart, which was great. And when I was stalking him for a project that I was doing with these folks, First Mile, back here, Vivian and Viv and Ian, it was one of those things where we were trying to find this group that was doing some amazing work around marine debris collection, cleaning up Alaska waterways. And when we found this guy was speaking in Japan. He was a thought leader everywhere, but he looked like a builder, a common Joe. And he was the most straight-to-the-point person I ever met. And from this journey of working with you 5 years ago, what you've been able to accomplish is amazing. So what I want to talk to you about is this hub model you're trying to create in Alaska, where waste comes in, product comes out, but it's owned by the most marginalized. It's owned by Alaskan natives. Whoa. Chris, first of all, welcome. Hi.
Thanks, John. Thanks, John, for having me. Appreciate it.
So tell us a little bit about your journey here. So you're from Montana. You go up to Alaska and you start just hauling plastic out of the ocean. How does that start?
Well, first I have to say that it's always been in my nature to clean up the environment. I think it comes from my parents, but I just have, maybe it's a disease. I hate it when things are broken. And I see a lot of broken stuff out there. It's hard for me to go through this world, it seems like, without trying to fix stuff. So that's what I'm doing. So the way it started, I get to Alaska. I have a good friend there. He's a bush pilot. He says, let's go out and do some beach combing on Montague Island. Montague Island's just incredibly beautiful island. It's 50 miles long. It's rugged, high mountains, beautiful marine habitat. Nobody lives there. It's wilder than any wilderness in the lower 48. So he takes me out there and we land this bush plane on the beach. We're going to go walk along, pick up fishing floats and things like that. And I get out of the airplane and I look at the shoreline, either direction, 20 miles. And all it is plastic garbage as far as you can see. This is in the 90s. And I have a biology background. I have a law degrees in environmental science, stuff like that. And I just stepped out there on that shoreline and I saw this incredible linear landfill. And I thought, what the hell is this? And we're hundreds of miles away from any place and it's covered with plastic. And just all these emotions go through your mind. First there's anger and disgust, and then you realize, my background, that this stuff is toxic, very toxic. I just knew it. I knew there was this stew of chemicals. I knew it was horrible for the environment. And understand, this is long before people were talking about ocean plastics or microplastics or nanoplastics, and that they're in our brain or in everywhere in our bodies. And I just knew it was bad. So immediately went back, started talking to my friends, and we started doing something about it.
Amazing. And so you started doing something. I think one thing you brought up was interesting, is in Alaska, there's more shoreline in Alaska, right, than the lower 48. And when you were pulling plastic, what was unique about the plastic you're pulling? I mean, is there any waste systems in Alaska that are built out? Where was that plastic going?
Well, it's always been a horrible challenge because, we are landfilling it. It's the only thing you could do with it. And the local landfills don't want it because it's high volume, can't compact it, it fills up their landfills, nobody wants to pay for it. And it finally got to the point where we had no place to take it. So then we start searching for options. What are we going to do with this stuff? We even send massive barges all the way down to the Seattle area to get this stuff landfilled, and the cost is exorbitant. So it's been a challenge. So then we really started looking for solutions.
So in Alaska, when we started talking, this whole idea was to say, look, there's all this waste coming in right from Japan, Taiwan. Like, tell us where the waste is coming from.
Most of our waste, this plastic waste, is, if you look at it by volume and by weight, it's commercial fishing debris. It comes from all over the Pacific. But if you look at it by just sheer numbers, it's everyday plastic items. There's not a plastic item made that is not on our beaches, from refrigerators all the way to computers to all of it. Anything that can wash into the water or fall off a shipping container ship, it'll wind up on our beaches. And the particular beaches that we're really focused on now, there's somewhere between 20 and 30 tons of plastic per mile on that shoreline. And when you talk 20 to 30 tons of plastic, that is a huge volume. And we fill up great big barges full of plastic and nothing flat from those shorelines. So it really became a challenge. What are we going to do with it?
Right, and I think that's the big question is, what are you going to do with a product, right, or material that has really no economic value, right? The cost of new resin is always more expensive than recycled content. And what you did and what you've been putting together for the past 5 years is pretty interesting. So walk us through a little bit of this vision that we're all co-creating and you're really looking to bring to life. And also, talk through a little bit how hard it is to partner. A lot of this here and a lot of the work we're doing is also with allies and others. How has it been to get, in a traditionally was viewed as a red state, how do you align folks to understand that this marine debris and this stuff is something that they can look at taking ownership, looking at waste, pun intended, as a resource?
Well, it's really been a challenge, John, especially when you look at the amount of commercial fishing debris that we have to deal with. And if you start highlighting that, you've really irritated one of the major industries in the state. So we've had to dance around that for a long time. And then because this is, you know, it's just a really remote place, extremely difficult to work. We use helicopters and tugs and barges, and it's very costly to clean this stuff up, a very limited amount of money. So then you're competing with everybody else that wants to do this work for a limited pot of money. So it's really hard in a very small state when everybody knows everybody else to build coalitions, because they're trying to, you know, you're going for the same pot of gold, it seems like. And so that's really been a challenge, and that's kind of changing now because more money is being put into this system. But still, you know, we're still trying to get this plant built, the hub.
Right, and a little bit of the hub. So the idea here, right, Chris, is that we're looking at plastic as a whole and looking at marine debris plastic, but also backhaul on Alaska Native land and also in the city, and trying to incentivize how plastic 1 through 9s can all be coming into one hub, which is owned by Bering Straits Tribal Corporation, correct?
Right, correct. So our goal is to bring all of this plastic into this hub. And so there's 7 resins, 1 through 7, all plastics, and then turn it into a product called Resin 9, which is made by a company called CRDC. And they take all this plastic, mixed plastic, and they convert it into an aggregate that can be put in concrete. And that's a big deal to us because Alaska doesn't make its own cement. And transportation costs are extremely high. So if we can take all this plastic and get it turned into this concrete aggregate that doesn't leach, and we can put it into material that is basically permanent, and we lock it up and sequester it, it takes it out of the environment, it puts a lot of people to work, it makes a product that can be sold. It's magic is what it is.
It's magic. So essentially looking at then you have plastic turning into a concrete aggregate. There's no industry, right? There's no manufacturing in Alaska, correct?
There's none to speak of, really.
Right. So all these containers come in, drop off, but they're not taking anything out. And the cost of construction material in Anchorage is 8 times more expensive than Seattle. So there is an economic opportunity there.
Well, I don't think in Anchorage is 8 times higher. It's quite a bit higher. But when you go out into these smaller villages, it certainly is for 8 times higher. You know. But yeah, there's a huge incentive for this plant to work, just economically. And environmentally, it's a godsend if we can pull it off.
And as we move in now to November, in the United States, we know there's kind of this election going on. How has it been working at the highest levels here, working with senators, working with congresspeople to get behind it?
It's actually been pretty gratifying to see it. The marine debris issue has gotten a lot of traction. I must say the Alaska Senator Sullivan and Senator Murkowski have been a big factor in that, really pushing it with Senator Whitehead from Rhode Island, White House, I think it is, from Rhode Island. But they're really great to work with, and they've done a lot to get the Save Our Seas Act passed. So from that standpoint, we've had it pretty good. You know, it's been really, really gratifying working with the people on the Hill.
Fantastic. So a couple of things to look at this too. You have legislation now coming around remanufacturing and reuse, right? Which is nice. You have movement making happening up there of having bipartisanship rally around this. And then you're also looking at a way for islands to have learnings as well. When you look at island nations and island states who are now, not only their cultural heritage is potentially being washed away by climate change, but also how can they do something with this waste and look at it as a resource to mitigate carbon? This is also a model here. So on your last words, Chris, you know, one thing that's been really interesting with you is you have all these volunteers and all these people coming up here. What are some words of inspiration that you can provide these folks as we head out and as you maybe have some time to meet and get to know these folks? What are some inspiration you can give?
Well, you know, looking back on our past, when we first saw this, we thought, boy, this is an intractable problem. But it really isn't, and we've made huge headway in the last 25 years that we've been working on this. And so even though a problem might look overwhelming, we can do it if we all put our minds to it. And the other thing is, our projects, we got a big project going on now. It's going to last 3 or 4 years, and we are going to take teams of volunteers out with us, 6 people at a time, and we're going to put them up on boats and stuff. So if anybody has a hankering to go on a helicopter ride in Alaska and go pick up plastic on the beach with us, contact me. But you have to make a serious commitment. These because of the remoteness and the cost of getting people back and forth, they're going to be stuck out there for a week. with us. So yeah, we'd love to have anybody who wants to come along and visit us.
So a final note here, all this work that you do, we're lucky to interact and have the privilege to have personal stories. This is something that I've been personally on this ride for 5 years. And all I got to say is that if you want to learn more, there's some people in the room. I want to recognize Ian and Viv. Over there, we have HGL with Gina over here. Feel free to talk to some of these folks, and thank you for the conversation, Chris. I know that people want to go to Alaska and see it, but if you want to see a documentary, Keepers of the North, there's a documentary out highlighting some of this work here. And also, I would be remiss as well as not talking about Blue Planet Alliance and looking at how we're cross-referencing this work in Hawaii as well. So thank you for your time. Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much.